right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Central Texas Mycological Society Myco Hangout. It's an event that we do once a month, and it's more of an informal sort of conversation where we have a guest that shares their interest in the field of mycology. And we're so excited tonight to have Jess Starwood zooming in from Ventura County in the Los Angeles area. And she is a herbalist, forager, chef, been a huge fan. Haven't been able to meet her in person, so happy to be able to finally meet her through the virtual space. And she has a book coming out called Mushroom Wanderland, Forager's Guide to Finding, Identifying, and Using 25 Wild Fungi, which will be available later this year. And so tonight we're going to chat about that. And she's also done a short presentation to share some of the beautiful visuals, all her own photography, foraged finds, creations. It's just stunning. And so I think that might be a good place to sort of jump in, and then we can go from there and chat about sort of your background and where you came to the creation of this book.
Yeah, that sounds good. I will walk through just a little bit of the visuals of my book, some highlights. Let me share my screen. Let's see. You guys can see that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So yeah, Mushroom Wanderland, a little play on the words with wander instead of wonder, but we're going to be both wandering and wondering in the forest. Yeah, this is the cover and where you can order it, pre-order now, but it won't be out until August 17th. Which is right before the Telluride Mushroom Festival in Colorado. So anyways, the book is separated into a couple sections. The first section is about the forager's forest. I talk a lot about just kind of the process of foraging and how it helps us relate to our environment and the world around us. Also about best practices and safety issues, what to do with a mushroom once you find one, and how to clean mushrooms and preserve them. But taking mushroom hunting in almost kind of a spiritual, personal experience, connecting with the land and the environment. So these are the second part of the book, or kind of middle of the book, talks a bit about cooking and preserving mushrooms. This here is just a few dishes I've come up with. The one on the bottom right is in the book. It's a basic mushroom jerky with our local black sage spices. But the others are kind of more experimental things I've done over the years. The one on the left is a chanterelle pasta. So that's literally just chanterelles shredded into kind of noodle-like little bits, and then with a nettle pesto and some seared southern candy cap mushrooms on top. All put together nicely in a little miner's lettuce leaf. So that was a fun little dish. The one on the other side with the spiky little cup, that's actually a wild cucumber husk, and I used that as a bowl and kind of a a sea urchin from the land sort of concept. It was kind of one of those crazy ideas I had when I was walking around foraging for a meal or for a dinner, and I was like, I don't know, had this crazy idea, but it ended up on the cover of a magazine, and people seemed to like it, I guess. But interesting, different things you can do with wild foods out there. So yeah, lots of photography on mushrooms and in the kitchen. The last half of the book is profiles on different groups of mushrooms. So the first section is on culinary mushrooms, are going to be kind of your top ones that you would be looking for, such as the morel or chanterelles or black trumpets here. And I do love chanterelles and morels, so they pop up a lot in my field of my photography. And then we have a nice haul of porcini. I found this earlier last year, actually. So the next section is on medicinal mushrooms, reishi, turkey tail, cordyceps, kind of go into a little bit of the science, the current science that's out there. I'm not saying that anything is going to be, a cure-all, but there is a lot of research coming out. So I've compiled a lot of that in there as well, profiling each of the mushrooms. More medicinal mushrooms, and psilocybe is profiled as well with lion's mane and Amanita muscaria. And then lastly, I talk a bit about toxic mushrooms, from jack-o'-lanterns to gallerina, and the Amanita ocreata, the destroying angel, and a few others too, just to keep it balanced and help people realize that, not everything's out there to be eaten. But yeah, so a little mushroom love for all those out there. I really enjoyed doing this book, and I'm really excited to have it out and about and share my my strange world. Let's see.
Beautiful, beautiful images. Yeah, so I think we could just start off maybe sort of giving sort of how your entry point, like what because everybody has their story, how they sort of came into their fascination with fungi, and it's always interesting to hear the different angles. So what was it that got you so fascinated?
Oh, let's see. Well, I have to say that it was kind of a gradual descent into the mushroom world. Growing up, mushrooms were certainly not a thing in my household. My family were not big mushroom eaters, especially my dad, who just hates mushrooms. Even to this day, there can't just, no mushrooms, won't try it, not even, no. So it wasn't, I don't even think I probably had a mushroom until I was probably like 10 years old or so. And when it was my mom and my sister and I, we went on a little like girls' vacation up to the mountains to a cabin, and my mom had bought some mushrooms, just little white button mushrooms, and she cooked them up, and I was like, these are the best things I've ever eaten. And I'm like, what is this? So that was a very memorable, very vivid memory I have. But then, we went back home. Mushrooms never came back up again. I lived in the desert. So you just didn't really see mushrooms much. And then when I started studying for my master's degree, and every week we were writing on different herbs and different things, and the mushrooms just kind of spoke to me. I know that sounds cheesy, but I just kept feeling drawn to researching them and finding out more, and then realizing that, wow, like I can actually find these out in the wild, and that just blew my mind. And I think all of that was happening though right during my divorce, and I feel like that really kind of gave me something to not something to do, but it showed me that there was more to life again. And it was just an exciting kind of new life, I guess, that I fell into, and I had no idea that it would lead here.
Yes. Yeah. And I guess like sort of turning it into like a foraging, making it such a broad part of your study and like how you live your life. Like, would you say that, since you were studying like to become an herbalist, do you feel like that, that practice of like foraging for herbs then translated into like seeing mushrooms as something that also is a medicine or like a way to nourish yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Like I had been so dependent on my husband, and it gave me this sense of like, I can be independent. I can find my own self out there, and I don't need anybody else. I've got everything we need is out there. And but then also like within us too. So yeah, it was very empowering and very exciting to kind of just have this major shift in my life and change my perspective.
Mm-hmm. So for someone that is sort of interested in this area in wild foods, you know, it's emerging and it kind of ebbs and flows, right? And especially with the pandemic, like there's just been a lot of interest again in being able to like use wild foods to get these nutrients that in these foods that are more nutrient dense than what you would be able to buy even at a grocery store. um, how would you, like, for someone that's wanting to sort of enter into this area, what kind of recommendations would you give them?
What I tell my students is, it can be really, really overwhelming to just be like, I want to learn what I can eat. But, as soon as you walk outside, there's so many different plants, and it seems like this wall of green that you just can't even pull out, like, oh, is that the same thing I saw last week? Is this, or was this, what's that? So I recommend to my students to choose like one plant, like one or two plants that kind of seem to speak to you, and just really learn about that, whether it's a plant or maybe it's a mushroom, and kind of get to know it really deeply and intimately, where it grows and how it grows and what kind of environment it likes, and getting to know it. And then you're going to see that plant you can't not see it. It seems to be everywhere. Kind of like, mushrooms. Now I just can't go somewhere. Well, right now I can't see any mushrooms right now in Southern California because it's so dry. But where there is mushrooms, I can't walk by without like seeing them almost subconsciously. But see, this happened with me with nettle. That was my first plant, and it took me forever to just identify it and find it. But then it just seemed to be like, oh, there it is, there it is, there it is. And I worked with that plant for quite a while at the beginning, and even now it still has that special connection. I have that special connection with it. So I feel like people who are interested in foraging, they can, really, really start small and not be overwhelmed by how many different plants and mushrooms there are out there. Especially with mushrooms, I feel like it can be really, really overwhelming to, every single mushroom you find is different, and it may be another year until you see that same mushroom again, or not, or it could be a couple of years. So by just focusing on a few, I think is a good start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. As someone who's gotten into it, you got to start slow because like it, when we were, evolving as a species, like that's just how we survived. And so you learned from literally a small infant, foraging around with your parents or going out with them and learning those types of things, building these relationships from a very young age that you really gotta, if you're getting into this as an adult, you gotta start small and make friends slowly. Cause
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Are there any wild foods that you've tried where you sort of, because you really do, like your creations are so artistic and seem so balanced. Like, has there ever been something that you've put together that was just, just did not work? It's not going in the book.
Often it does happen. And there's a lot of experiments that happen and they don't ever happen again. And let's see. Yeah, let's see. I think probably the best story here, it's not something that didn't turn out well, but too much of something can be a bad thing, even if it's, something as simple as a puffball mushroom. I was doing a lot of experimentation last summer, and I had some very large puffballs that I was working with, and I wanted to try everything with them. And it was fun. I had my kids involved in it. They were like, yeah, okay, this is good. This is good. And we tried the pizza, we tried just puffball and everything. And then the last thing I did, which I thought was a really cool thing, was to make a puffball waffle. And it tasted fine, but because we had eaten so many puffball things for so long, I can't look at another puffball the same anymore. It's just, even my daughter, she's like, Mom, how come every time you mention the word puffball, I have this feeling in my back of my throat? And I'm like, sorry about that. I think I may have ruined puffballs for life for them, but yeah, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't say puffball waffles was a fail. It could be done again, but maybe somebody who hasn't been eating them for like a month straight.
Not everything can be waffleized. Lesson learned.
Right.
Yeah. You know, would you say, because you were talking about how, this sort of scarcity and the sort of ethical concerns around foraging, I see that brought up a lot in the communities, especially in places like, Texas, where we don't have a lot of public land. I mean, that's one ethical issue. And then the environmental issue is another one. How would you, for someone that's interested in this area, how would you describe the sort of ethical, like the ethos of foraging?
It's definitely a very fine line. And there's so many people getting into foraging right now, and mushroom hunting that, and even just people being out in nature right now, because of the pandemic and because of what's going on. There's a lot of people out, and I'm not seeing a lot of good things from it. I'm seeing so much more trash than I've ever seen. People just not respecting the land. So as far as, ethical foraging, when I'm teaching, I really emphasize that this, you have to go at this. This is my cat. This is my travel buddy, PETA. My buddy. The ethical thing is really important. There is only so much out there, and we have an impact no matter what. Whether we are getting all of our food from the grocery store, where does that food come from? That food comes from land that has been clear cut and monocropped. We feel better we're buying it from the store, or do we feel better collecting a basket full of mushrooms and berries and greens? So, to be alive on this planet, we have to have an impact. One way or another to live, we have to have an impact. But we can choose that impact and, make better choices and ethical ones too. So, every time we go out to the forest, consider how we are interacting and how we're, what kind of footprints we're leaving. Are we clear cutting or, fully harvesting every single elderberry, or, so that there's no fruits left for the birds or the animals? It's a balance, and it lies in the responsibility of every single forager. And I think the only thing that we can do really at this point is education. And I think education is the important part here, because I can tell people who know that there are valuable foods out there, they tend to have a better understanding of like why we need to respect the land, why we need to save it, why we need to do good things. But if we don't have a sense of what these plants are, their value, sure, it's like no problem, we can put in another subdivision or shopping mall. We see no value in it. So there's even research studies that say that the more people are educated about the value of the land, the more they're going to put effort into protecting it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, no, and we're in the Austin area, which is another kind of boom town, similar to Los Angeles, just like a lot of sprawl, a lot of land being developed.
Mm-hmm.
So, these spaces are becoming fewer and far between. So yeah, and I would say too, kind of going back to the nutrient dense thing, I, for myself personally, like I was looking to be able to get some of these like trace minerals, these things that you can't necessarily get in like food that's grown, um, that you can buy at the store even, uh, finding out that I had like deficiencies in certain areas. So that's part of the reason why I got into foraging. Um, can you speak to a little bit about maybe like some of the research that you may know of, or why what the importance of being able to like eat food that just sort of is working within the ecosystem on its own, like why it's better for you?
Yeah, the wild plants are not they're not being watered, they're not being fertilized, they're having to fend for themselves, they're developing greater amounts of their natural protection against predators, and a lot of those compounds are beneficial to us, and they're survivalists, and they're making the best out of their situation. And when we have farmed these plants and altered them into a way that they are bigger, brighter, more colorful, more marketable, they are losing all of those micronutrients. They can't take care of themselves if they were left alone. They are also being grown in soil that is deficient in a lot of the necessary minerals. We're losing a lot of those nutrients in our soil by farming over and over and over again. So we may get more food for our but we may get more food per, say tomato or bell pepper or whatever, but the wild counterpart's going to have a much more concentrated amount of those micronutrients, and and even medicinal compounds. That's what that's what we're looking for when we're looking at like medicinal herbs, these plants that can naturally have those strong compounds that we don't always necessarily see in the cultivated ones.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So kind of like jumping back into the fungi queendom, where would you say your favorite place would be to forage for mushrooms now that you're sort of on the road, you got your van life set up?
Yeah. I've seen a lot of different areas in the last couple years, and it really depends where the rain is. I've had really good years in Colorado, but last year I don't think I found more than 1 or 2 mushrooms. So yeah, I love Colorado. It's great. But then, last year I was like, oh, that was pretty bad. But I mean, the Pacific Northwest is pretty awesome. Just how lush it is, the density of plants and the mushrooms just seemingly everywhere. So I do love it up there. And I did get a chance to go out to New England last year, in Maine and Massachusetts, and even there was amazing. And it was incredible. I must have just timed it right or something, but it was great. Haven't been to Texas yet, so I'm not sure what you guys got going on down there, but
Yeah, it's definitely feast or famine here. You know, we had a year in 2019 where we had two 100-year floods, and you know, as mushrooms are sort of like an indicator of like disruption, right, in this ecosystems. It was an abundant year for chanterelles, and you know, I was just mostly foraging for my own personal, you know, consumption, and I was finding like hundreds of pounds of chanterelles, and so that was time for me to talk to a few chef friends, um, but yeah, it really just depends, and we're hoping with our big, you know, the terrible ice storm that we had, that we'll have a good year for morels, but we haven't had any rain since this big. I mean, like sprinkles, but not a lot of rain. So it's really sort of feast or famine here, and you know, there's certain, in Texas is so different. You know, there's desert, there's very lush, like East Texas, we have the big thicket, which is very biodiverse, not just for mushrooms, but also for all types of everything in the botanical world. It's beautiful. It's sort of like East meets West. So a lot of things that you find in the eastern part of the United States kind of ends there. And then you have all of the things from the West. And so it's a really nice national preserve that we like to do a lot of forays and go out there once or twice a year. So yeah, if you come to Texas, definitely go to Big Thicket. And we'd love to see you in Austin. But yeah, it's really, our seasons vary. We have times in the fall and spring. But yeah. Would
nice.
you say there's like any other areas of like with just where else would you love to go?
Would I love to go? Well, I was supposed to go to mainland Mexico last year. That sounded like it would have been a lot of fun. I was supposed to go with a friend, and that sounds great. I'd love to go to New Zealand. I'd love to go to South America. I'd love to, just to see anywhere. So what pops up wherever. You know, I was so surprised. Last summer, I went to Arizona mushroom hunting, and even though I grew up in Phoenix, I had some friends I met up with up in the mountains, and I was absolutely amazed at the diversity that they have up there. And it's, you know, mushrooms are everywhere, fungi are everywhere, and even though we don't see them, they're doing their thing, and they can always be pretty surprising.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah.
So somebody was asking in the Zoom chat, what should we look for when we go out foraging, and like what are the best seasons for going on foraging foods and mushrooms?
The best seasons I would say would be spring, for sure. But you know, get to know the plants throughout their whole season, their whole year. And as far as mushrooms, you know, they have different seasons. Some like morels are going to be in the spring, and others will be in the fall or summer. It depends on where you're at, really. But what to look for, like I was kind of talking earlier, it's hard to pick out one thing to look out for, because there's so much. But if you do have something in mind and start learning how to identify, and that can be a good start. But just go out with a curious mind and be open to everything. Just don't eat anything you know, don't pick something and eat it that you haven't identified yet. Just that's the only thing. Use all your other senses first, and then
Mhm. Yeah,
Besides that, oh, go ahead, Angel. I was gonna say,
I was going to add on to that too. Like I know that a lot of areas we have a few field guides specifically towards mushrooms, and I also tell a lot of friends that ask me like a good place to start. I mean, it's the technology isn't perfect, but using the app iNaturalist, if you're just interested and you're wanting to learn plants, it's a good place to start because there's a community. You can take photos, and there's the pattern recognition built into it. And if you aren't able to take a course and learn like herbalism or whatnot, it's like a good way to kind of quickly, just almost guerrilla style, like just jump in. And of course, you never want to eat anything until you confirm it with someone that's an expert. But it's a way to try to see what the technology can suggest, and there's people behind it like verifying things as well. um, but yeah, that's always kind of a way to.
so besides not eating something that you're not 100% sure that it's safe to eat, what is there anything else that you would suggest avoiding, like to remain safe or to take it slow?
There's also ones that have uh, issues of touching them, like poison oak or poison ivy. That's definitely one to really know. And um, um, let's see.
The
Yeah,
needles are fun.
but
I
that,
actually like the touch. I'm like, maybe I'm a part Finnish. I love the feel of nettles. It's like a little electricity.
I do too. I do too. That's the feeling of just all your immune system activating, everything just kind of like alive.
Mhm.
Yeah, but that's much different than a cactus. Yeah, cactus thorns in your fingers. A different kind of pain there. But yeah, touching can sometimes be, a good way to learn about plants and their textures and feels, and then, smell. But people may also have allergies to things that they don't know that they have allergies to. So I don't say to just jump in and immerse yourself completely physically, but cautiously, a little bit at a time, and see how your body reacts and all that.
Yeah, I think Phil, you had a question about a cactus. I think it'd be a good time to ask that question.
Oh yeah, yeah. You mentioned the cactuses, and I was kind of reading through your blogs, getting ready for this talk tonight, and I noticed you talked a little about the saguaro cactus, and I was wondering if you could kind of talk a little bit about that and the ecosystems that they live in, and kind of just their overall significance and the significance of that ecosystem.
Yeah, the saguaro cactus, as we call it in Arizona. It lives in the Sonoran Desert. It's an endemic species, and um, it's growing up there, I was like, oh, it's just a cactus, whatever. But after living in California for almost 20 years and going back and forth, it's like these things are pretty cool. And I had never eaten one of their fruits before, until a couple years ago. And they are just amazing. They're extremely tasty. But the challenge is getting to them. They're going to be up there, maybe 20, 30, 40 feet up. No, not 40, but way up there. You're not going to reach up and grab them. Luckily, they're not covered in little tiny spines or glochids like the prickly pear is. But so you could grab them, but they're on top of this very spiny, very large cactus. But what the natives would do would be to, when the cactus dies, it has these structures inside, these very long kind of ribs that they would tie together and make this pole. I forget what it's called, but they would use that to knock off the fruits from the top, because the birds absolutely love them, and you got to get to them pretty quick. You can't wait for them to just fall off. By then, the birds would have eaten all the fruit out. But super tasty. They live in the desert where it feels like there's nothing there. It's desolate, but the desert is actually a very, very rich and abundant place.
Yeah, I really like your like sticking on the cactus topic. We have a lot of prickly pears in Texas. We don't have this species. And with this storm that came through, they're all just like collapsed in on themselves. And I'm sure they'll bounce back. They're such a resilient species. But the we have a couple of different varieties, but I really love the color. And then what you can get from the dye, like the cochineal too. Have you done anything like using cochineals to like color things? I've seen you've done some beautiful things with the color from the fruits of prickly pears.
I love using the juice of the prickly pear fruit. It's just so vibrant. But just lately, in the last 6 months or so, I've been getting into a little bit of fabric dyeing, and I did get a chance to use the cochineal, and it's a skill I need to continue to work with, but it's fascinating that there's so many colors out there that you can work with. And then just how you can alter the colors, even though you have one thing that's making, one pigment, but you can change it by adding mordants and different, things to alter that color and get many colors from just one thing.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is your favorite thing to make with the prickly pear fruit?
Oh, people do really like my prickly pear margaritas. But I've done chocolates with them, like a prickly pear filled, or a chocolate truffle filled with prickly pear. Super tasty. I get requests for that all the time. Ice cream, or it's so good, but then also savory too. It's super simple. I like to make a vinaigrette with the prickly pear juice and the bright red fruit juice. And a lot of times we use it for sweet things, but I like to add some lemon juice or lime. Lime really goes well with it.
Knocks out that like kind of that agave or that greenish flavor. I was thinking about I foraged some. We have, and I'm sure you all have it there. It's the oh gosh, what's the name of it? They have like a type of or a type of acid that adds a lot of like lime flavor, and the native people in Texas would mix them with prickly pears, kind of almost like it seemed like a kind of like a granola or something, or some sort of like protein rich flavor. It was a sumac.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of different types of sumac here. And so so I love that combination, just like mixing the acidic with that flavor.
Yeah, definitely. And trying different things and different combinations, and rather than just, it's a fruit juice, so let's add some white sugar to it and call it good. so thinking of different combinations and applications where, doing a savory sauce with it could be interesting, or
Mm.
yeah, but prickly pear fruit definitely needs that acid in there to help round out the flavors. Whether it's lime or lemon or sumac.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. Yeah, so let's see. I guess since we're on the topic of recipes, so is this something you like? How do you go about developing it? What's your process? I know that's like a big question, but we can spend as much time.
Yeah. Let's see. So I I did not go to culinary school. I do not really, never really taken any formal cooking classes. But I did go to art school. um, but a lot of times my recipes or the things that I create come from more of an inspiration of color and texture. And I get kind of a vision of what I want it to look like at the end. And then it's like a reverse engineer into, okay, how am I going to bring flavors and the right elements together to create this crazy thing I have in my head. So a little backwards, I guess, but but it has been challenging for people to be like, hey, can you write a cookbook? And I'm like, yeah. Okay. Because I just go a lot on, in the moment, and go by flavor and taste, and what it, how I'm experiencing it as I'm putting it together. So yeah, I don't know if that's a really great.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good answer. Like, I'm very instinctual. I don't do a lot of baking myself because it's just so scientific. So I find myself enjoying the more artistic expressions in the kitchen where you're kind of going on instinct and feeling
Yeah.
your way rather than measuring everything out by the gram. um, but yeah, we have a few questions in the chat. Allie asked, how much do your kids enjoy foraging and eating wild foods?
Um, it's kind of fluctuated over the years. When they were very little, I had a pretty nice sized garden in my front yard, and they loved just eating whatever from it, and we would go for hikes, and they would eat things, be like, here, try this and do that and whatever. They were very open-minded at that point, but then um, I think they got a bit, I don't know, self-conscious of having this like weird mom that goes out in the wild and eats things, and that was different from other moms at school. So um, it it has fluctuated, but like right now, my older daughter is putting together a little book that she's making with all the different oaks of California. She has a page for each one, and she's like, Mom, I need to find a valley oak leaf. And I'm like, okay, well, let's go to the park, let's go find one. And she gets it, she's been around it, and she's internalizing it, and it'll come around at some point. I think there's still hope for my younger daughter. Right now, video games are really cool,
Yeah.
and that's the world we live in. But if they just appreciate nature at some point, we'll be all right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your process of like how did you come to writing a book? This is your first one, so how did it how did you come to that?
Uh, well, it had been ever since I knew what books were, I wanted to write a book. I wanted my own book to write. And for a very long time, I was like, I don't know what to write about. I don't know what I'm going to write. And I, started on this wild food path and learning and I was teaching some classes here and there, but my friend Pascal, who's here, he's like, "Why haven't you written a book yet?" I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. But he's like, "Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do." And so I'm like, okay, I guess I'll write a proposal, and he helped me out a bit on that part and getting connected with a publisher, but then that didn't quite work out. So it was kind of a long process to where I finally ended up with the publisher I'm at currently. But it was quite a surreal process of like, oh, this is going to be a book someday. Like somebody's gonna, people like more than one, more than just my mom, are going to have this book in their hand and read it. And so it was a cool process. And I wrote the book in 6 months, and which was really tough because, okay, well, I first was planning to write a mushroom cookbook, and the publisher was like, "That's cool, but can you write a book just about like an introduction to mushrooms?" And I was like, yeah, I can do that, but I don't have the photos for that. Like I've been focusing on food and the kitchen and plating and styling, and that's where I had been for working for the last year or so. But I said, yeah, sure, I can give you a book with mushroom that has photos of mushrooms in 6 months. And we had just like ended the year in the mushroom season in California at that point, and I'm like, I guess I'm going traveling. And so I traveled from Pacific Northwest to Colorado, Arizona, and then the Northeast to photograph mushrooms. And somehow, miraculously, I got most of them all photographed in those 6 months.
Nice. Yeah. You had mentioned Pasquale and him being a friend of yours. Like, what type of collaborations have you all done together? I've seen and I admire his wild pottery that he's been working on. Do you incorporate any of that in your photos or?
Well, he's been very generous and has gifted me a few pieces, and I just love how they look. They're very natural and rustic looking, and I just really enjoy that. And I think it goes really well with wild foods. And we've done events together, dinners and tasting events, and have collaborated a lot on a lot of ideas too over the years.
Yeah, I know. I really like his focus, and I was lucky to be able to go on a hike with him before the pandemic, and it was in February around this time a year ago, and it was very interesting. His focus on invasives and that sort of thing. Is that an area that you are also interested in, like foraging invasives? And like if someone were interested in being an invasivore, like what sort of advice would you give them?
Start with your backyard, and yeah, I feel like there could be such a different shift in mindset of how we manage our landscapes. And so many of the invasive plants or these non-native plants that people try to get rid of, they're food. Most of them are food. So I feel like if we just kind of change our thinking about, how we manage our landscape around us, especially in California, we have such issues with wildfire, and our hills are covered in black mustard and other brassica plants that are just fuel for fire, but they're all edible too. So I don't have exactly the solution, but I feel like there is something that can be done, something creatively, some way to manage these plants that are taking over and using up resources for the native plants, but just starting by shifting our perspective of how we view our environment around us can be I think a good start.
Yeah, we have a lot of the similar type of issues in Texas, and people are looking towards creative solutions that don't involve chemical companies, or they're selling large quantities of herbicides to like municipalities or corporations. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and I think I know there's been a few projects too where people are using even fungi as like a way to like inoculating like invasives with fungi to suppress them, sort of slowly take them out, like those sort of experiments as well. So yeah, I think we're about an hour in here. Are there any other questions? I'm just going through the chat now.
I have one that I kind of thought of as we were talking about the invasive species and such. I'm just curious, like, if you have any thoughts about like foraging and wild foods and like indigenous land back struggles, and like, I don't know, to be really radical in my framing here, the abolishment of the white settler colonial state or anything like that. Obviously, like that's kind of a huge topic, and it might not be like your area of expertise, but I'm just curious if how do you think about this as we as someone who is like a white person who came, whose family immigrated here much into that colonial period, like how should we be thinking about these, foraging on stolen land, I guess?
Yeah, that's a challenging question, and tough topic to address. And I come from a bit of Native American background myself, but also white too. So we are all natives from somewhere, and just like us, the plants are migrating around the world, so if all of our non-native plants here are actually from Europe, and they came along with people. That these plants are following people around the world, really because they're meant to be our food. And I do sympathize with or empathize is the better word, empathize with consuming and harvesting native foods, native plants in land that maybe you did not come from, but Yeah, that's a tough one. And I feel like, yeah,
Yeah, I
hard.
mean, it's like it's such a huge topic, and it's hard. Everyone's going to kind of have their own feelings about it. Um, one of the things that I kind of feel that kind of aligns with it is like when we look to uh, having the communities that are still extant, they might have either been, removed from their lands and living on a reservation, or some of them still live in the ecosystems where they, have been living for tens of thousands of years. One measurement that we could kind of incorporate as we try and like move into this, dealing with climate change and these massive ecological shifts is like the more we can ensure that these indigenous life ways and foods are protected and supported, the healthier our total ecosystems are. Because I think to kind of talk about an example that's from pretty recent history, but the Mi'kmaq fishermen fishing villages up in uh, eastern Canada, they were being attacked by commercial fishermen very violently, actually. So very much like a continuation of a lot of the colonial struggles in the past. Whenever they were just, those fishermen had, subsistent farming or subsistent fishing permits that were significantly lower than what the commercial fishermen are asking for, and then they're being attacked. But if we are supporting those native fisheries through regulations and whatnot, the more able those people are to live those traditional life ways, and that benefits everyone. It kind of grows out from there because they are just, they have that diet that was really intertwined with that ecology that they had been living in for tens of thousands of years, and
Mhm.
it was actively disrupted by uh, the settler colonial state in order to remove these people from their land and steal it, and that whole process. So I guess in my mind, that's kind of one way we can kind of start to I don't know, restore justice to those people, is by protecting those foodways for them, and helping them protect those foodways and making it an issue that we talk about. So
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
absolutely agree with that.
yeah, I think acknowledging it too, like especially, knowing that a lot of, especially the indigenous plants, like understanding how they were used and seeing it as like, mimicking like how people used it, not turning it into a commodity. So much of food is about, packaging it and putting it on the grocery shelf, or, turning it into this sort of commodity too. It's
Right. Like corn was a sacred plant. And now look what it's turned into. It's turned into high fructose corn syrup. It's turned into um, just this
mhm,
uh, thing that's not even good for us anymore.
yeah, it's like perpetuating the like fossil fuel dependence on fossil fuels.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, let's see. Looking in the chat, let's see. Do we see? Can you talk about the different areas that we should look for, and what that would be
we
good
kind we
for
kind of
foraging?
covered that one already. That
Yeah.
was where I got that one from earlier.
Oh,
But
gotcha.
would you mind telling us a little about your apothecary behind you? It's very visually stimulating.
Yeah. So this is my collection of dried herbs and mushrooms um, that I have, and also tinctures too, that I have collected over the last few seasons. It rotates pretty quickly. It's right next to my kitchen here at my house, so it's accessible. It gets used a lot, and constantly being filled up with new things. Um, but yeah, that's my main collection of wild things. I also have I just built a smaller little shelf for my mobile apothecary in my van. And so I get to, bring along kind of the most important things, or for processing stuff on the road too. As I'm out there, I can dry or pickle or ferment or whatever on the road in the van. So it's kind of just a little mini version of my house here.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see if there's any other questions here. Were there any that I missed, Phil?
Not that I could see. Does anybody have any in the chat or out there on YouTube? Feel free to drop them in the chat, or out there on Facebook. I'll see them. There's a little bit of a delay on that stream, so it might take a second. So if you have a little bit of patience from when you send it off, yeah. But
Yeah. Are there any other areas, things that we haven't covered yet, Jess, that you would like to share tonight?
Let's see. I think we covered quite a bit of kind of the basics. But yeah, well, I'm kind of excited to see where the journey goes after the book. I've really focused a lot on mushrooms in the last year or two, like really heavily to write the book. Kind of stepping back a little bit and kind of like, well, what is all this mean, and what is kind of the bigger picture with all of the, all of the herbs and the mushrooms and the food. And it's kind of the like, well, so what? So like, why am I doing this? And kind of exploring, kind of my own personal journey a little bit deeper and a little bit farther. And it's been, my journey has been with food for so long that it's, our food really is us. And so I've become this person who has gone from a standard American diet to a vegan diet, or vegetarian, and then vegan, and then raw vegan for a little while, and then adding in wild foods. And it's like, well, what is this connection doing for me, and where is it going? So I've been thinking a lot about that lately. And it's how they say that your whole body changes every 7 years. All the cells in your body are replaced every 7 years. And it's so it's just kind of interesting to have a little different perspective on that. Yeah, like the so what, the why, and what's next. And
I think this leads into Laurel in the chat. She hopped in with a question about, is there anything new to you in the ecosystem that you're wanting to learn more about?
Good question, Laurel. And hi. Yeah, it's been kind of going off of what I was just saying. It's like just this diving into different areas and just absorbing and really learning everything about, at first it was, organic foods, and then it was herbs, and then wild herbs, and then mushrooms, and then yeah, it's like, well, what's next? And I feel like probably pushing more creative boundaries for sure. And pushing kind of exploration of flavor and different places, and really kind of getting into the more subtleties of creating a dish and an experience, because when we're eating, it's such a multi-sensory experience, and to sit down after having walked through the woods and you've learned all about these things, and then to sit down to a meal made from those plants that you just experienced, how can I push those edges further? And because it's almost in a way experiential art. It's immersing a person, the viewer, into a scenario where every sense is being activated, whether it's taste, sight, sound, smell, touch. Everything is in that moment, curated. And so just curious how I can begin to really push those edges. But there's always so much more to learn in the natural world. And just knowing them better. And, every year I'm learning new plants and new flavors, and just, it just builds on each other. But I think I got the major groups down so far, between the plants and the fungi. I am leaving out animals, though, because that's just not where I'm at yet in my culinary journey. I've been vegan for 15 years now, and I do eat fish every once in a while, but we'll see. I don't know. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the new frontier for me.
Yeah, so Sammy, did you want to ask your question, or I can read it as well?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't know if I could unmute. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, I am. So I'm an herbalist. I'm a midwife and studying to be a nurse practitioner, like family practice. So I've been an herbalist for over 30 years. And I know as my practice, I used to be a chef too. So I think we have probably so much in common. But I know as my sort of practice has deepened, I've looked for like all of the ways that I can use plants, because when I tincture a plant for a medicine, and then the plant is spent, I'm like, what can I continue to use this plant for rather than just putting it in the compost pile? And one of the things that I've started to do in the last few years is I've started to work with dyes a lot. And so I have a lot of fermenting dye vats, and figuring out how to extract color from the plants and use those as well for dyeing cloth and all of that. So I didn't know if you used any, if you know of any like mushrooms. I am trying to work with some mushrooms, but if you've ever done any mushroom extraction of dyes and things like that. And I missed the very beginning, so I'm really sorry. I don't know if this is like completely off topic or you maybe covered it. So I apologize if that's true, but I'm just curious. I think we all kind of like, especially if you're into cooking and fermenting and all those things, like these things in microbiology, like they all start to run together. So.
Yeah, we did talk a little bit about that earlier, but I have just barely dabbled into dyeing with plants and mushrooms. I've only dyed so far with dyer's polypore, and it was fun. It was great. I'm excited to learn more over time, but yeah, I love that there's so many things that we can do with plants and mushrooms, and it's not just food, but it's also, very creative things as well. But so I can't really talk too much on like the technicalities of dye, because just not my area, but I have done it, and it does work, and it's a magical experience.
Can you explain to people what kind of colors you get from dyers polypore? Is that something that you have experience with?
Yeah, it's a nice. I have it like right over there. Um, it's kind of a tannish ochre brown color, warm tan, and I did, and it's a nice color. I think probably with some other mordants, could be some other colors that would come out, or different variations of that. And I did just get some jack-o'-lantern mushrooms, Amphilotus olivescens, which supposedly does a kind of a purple color, which sounds pretty exciting. I've been wanting to do that, but it's on my to-do list. I have some, and I'm excited to try. Been excited to try that one for a while.
Nice. Do you all have indigo milk caps?
No, we don't. And that was one on my list that I had wanted to find when I went out to the East Coast, but did not.
Yeah, Big Thicket's a good spot for that. We have to go. I know they do grow and they've been observed in Central Texas, but it's very rare. But there's a lot in Houston and Big Thicket area.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a fun one. I know that the dye in that is not only used, for, just like textiles and whatnot, but I think that there's, it's used in like doing like blood work or like tracing and doing tests, like in biomedical work.
Interesting.
Yeah, I found a paper on how they were using it in that way too, and it was better than what, like, I think it's like, I forget what they currently use, but it was better for a bunch of reasons.
I would imagine so. Cool. Yeah, dyeing should be an interesting area to get into. But yeah, sorry, another cat.
And Perry pointed out that there's a Facebook group titled called Mushroom and Lichen Dyers United. And that's not a Facebook endorsement either. So don't go joining Facebook just to be in that group. But yeah, I know there's one girl that there's a book that's out too that's pretty thorough. I've come across her things. I'm trying to remember her name, but it's specific to mushroom dyes as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I had gotten a book on kind of just general wild plant dyes, and they didn't really talk about mushrooms, so I was kind of making it work. But that would be really cool to see one that's just on mushrooms.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's let's see, mycopigments.com. Put it in the chat. All right. Do we have any other questions out there?
Hey, Jess, this is Art. I was talking earlier and I got my times wrong. I thought that was the end of the presentation. We were just hanging out. So I was just being all chatty. And then Philip's like, okay, well, let's wrap that up.
Yeah, I was thinking, no, that was some really good stuff. I don't want to, I want to catch that on the
nobody's
stream for everybody.
I'm filling the awkward silence there, Philip. Anyway, we got a little bit into the ethical foraging thing, and I love seeing that phrase because it does seem like an oxymoron when you think of just the sheer number of people, and what if everybody got the bug to go into the woods and find stuff. And and then reading books like Dennis Benjamin's Mushroom Hunter book, where it just sounds like all mushroom hunters are just, these hoarders, they just like get everything they can, it's just so cutthroat in the Pacific Northwest. But I'm just curious, like, where do you see, because you were talking about some soul searching, and where's all this going, and obviously we're getting to these weird places with sustainability, and there's just no real good overlap. You can't draw a Venn diagram of sustainability, foraging, and or wild foods, and all this. Like, do you see wild foods moving more into cultivation, or some way of somehow remediating that, or what? Or am I just sort of being alarmist here? Because it's always going to be this weird niche thing that only 10 nerds that want to do. So.
Well, all of our cultivated foods originally came from wild foods to begin with anyways. So to start cultivating all of these wild foods, we're kind of just going back around doing the same thing we've already been doing since, we got hungry then, thousands and thousands of years ago. Yeah, there's certainly a lot more people out there. But I do try to encourage folks to, look in your own backyard. A lot of times, we're so focused on the allure of the woods and the forest, and we've got to go out with our little baskets and wander into the woods to go find our dinner. But, a lot of times we have some really great stuff just right, at home, or in our neighborhoods or our neighbors' yards. Make friends with your neighbors and forage their yards. But yeah, growing your own too. I really love miner's lettuce. So I grow it instead of, and it's a native plant. I don't want to have a really severe impact on, our area here. So I put it wherever I can, on my yard. But, I even have mushrooms that pop up in my yard too. And, having morels literally outside my back door isn't really that bad of a thing. I won't complain about that.
You don't miss the hunt. Come on. You miss the hunt a little bit. The disappointment, all of that. You don't miss that.
I don't miss the disappointment. No. And yeah, but, there's, when you can eat directly from your backyard, I think that should be priority. And I feel like we have so much urban area that can be utilized. If we're planting stuff that actually has, value, like food value, a lot more people can eat without having severe impacts on wildlands and, and then the whole issue of foraging in parks, that, you're not allowed to, it's illegal. But making food forests or parks where you can, like, what if we had parks that had forageable landscaping that, okay, go for it, and instead of all these plants that you can't really do much with other than, oh, it looks pretty and it's, water tolerant, but other than that, it's just taking up space. So,
yeah. Yeah, I would add to, I see that a lot in this area too. I don't know if it's the same in, Los Angeles, but, consideration more for trying to redefine like park spaces to be more of like areas that can be foraged, like with the food forest concept. I mean, it's not something that can feed masses, of course. And, everyone's glomming on to this idea of a food forest with the intent of like thinking that it's something that can mass produce food. It's not really. It's just trying to, I think we're relearning kind of how indigenous people like used to live. Like this is, they worked with nature and, cultivated and added to what already was in their ecosystems rather than, um, you know, clear cutting and sort of doing what sort of Western colonizers did when they came here. So
Yeah. Sammy brought up a really good point in the chat. It says, she says, as an anarchist, it's hard not to feel like no one owns the land. We're all just borrowing it, and like that actually used to be very much the case back starting in the 1600s. But there's a whole movement throughout Europe called the enclosure movement, where it's just basically like landlords would start to privatize the land, and it's a complicated process, but they were basically kicking off people who had what was called the usufruct right to the land, just meaning you can use the land, you can make stuff from the land, but you're not able to destroy the land. And basically the landlords are like, oh no, now we have to, due to economic reasons, we're going to start growing more meat or making more things for linens and that kind of stuff. And that similar process carried over into into North America as the colonists set up their land, and it was basically like this. How they saw it was like a huge empty space for them to enclose into a private commodity that now we live under that kind of land relationship regime, and that's just something that we kind of don't really talk about as far like in our history classes very much, and like how that like the construct of owning land is something that is relatively new. It's like 300 400 years old, as opposed to like, not to say that the Roman society was the perfect society, but like the peasants and the slaves in that society had usufruct rights to the land that they lived on. So while they were able to make their lives and had that deep relationship to the land. And speaking on how people used to, this is kind of like my area of academic study, so I kind of know a little bit about a lot of this stuff. That lands used to be managed and farmed very communally. Like we tend to think of like farming as a private property enterprise. In fact, some of the research that I've found specifically framed it that way. They did like a computer model to like model the transition from hunter-gatherer societies into farming societies, but it totally ignored the fact that like the lands were managed in commons, like the different, and this was basically the case all over the world, like the farming styles and plants that we would practice, but more or less like people were managing these lands in a very shared communal fashion.
mhm.
So we need to be
Great.
trying to return back to that. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we're not all team players. So, I'm going to go in there and forage all of those chanterelles in that community park. Sorry.
Well,
I'm setting my alarm 5 minutes earlier than Angel.
see, that's the thing is we set
here.
rules about how we manage the commons, and we agreed those rules were agreed upon together. And if you violated those rules, there would be consequences to that, because it's not just about that individual. And it's definitely something we've lost. And now we have use regimes that are enforced through violence, based on if you have the financial means to have access to it.
Well, unfortunately, just going back to that notion of farming, foraging, taking things out of the wild, looking in your backyard. For fungi, at least, 90% of the ones that we really care about can be cultivated. And they can be captured. Specimens can be taken somehow. Tissues can be transferred, and we can cultivate them. We can grow them rather cheaply, at least for ourselves. So that's an area that I really like in terms of that whole like food security thing, or just ownership of one of the most basic things that we need in our lives. But really kind of what you mentioned about looking in your own backyard. The pandemic has really sort of shrunken my scope, just from the way our family is structured here, to be able to get out as much as I'd like. So, you know, I think I'm up to about 18 species of fungi just in my property, you know, that I've been able to identify. I've gotten samples of quite a few stored for what reason, I don't know. It's Daniel Reyes got me doing that. But yeah, you know, like meeting more plant people has been great, because that's something I know very little about. But then they're just like, oh yeah, that's mallow. You can, you know, do blah 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 and blah blah blah. It's like, oh, who knew? But yeah, it just that notion of us being able to find the one Hericium ever that we're ever going to find in the wild, but clone it and then have it forever. Like your jars behind you, you've got a sort of an arsenal of things. You know, we're kind of individually, some of us are trying to do that just with fungi. You know, just keep libraries of things that we can just sort of conjure up whenever we want.
Yeah.
So how about you plug your book one more time, Jess? Because I know some people are asking about it in the YouTube chat.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to look through the images again, or I can just talk about it?
Yeah, either whichever's good. I know people were really loving those photos.
Yeah, I came late. I'd love to see if you don't mind.
Yeah. Go through the whole presentation again.
Throw a link in the chat too.
Okay.
That.
All right. So, yeah, lots of photography in this book. All mostly within 6 months of last year. So this is the full title, Mushroom Wanderland, not Wonderland, but Wanderland is just a play on words of wandering through the forest and what you may find. A forager's guide to finding, identifying, and using more than 25 wild fungi. It was definitely very difficult to narrow it down to 25. The publisher was like, nah, we need to keep it concise. And I was like, well, but what about this? And what about that? How can I leave this out and that? But is what it is. And these are a good 25 to know. So it is available for pre-order right now. You can get it on Amazon, but to avoid Amazon and that nonsense, you can order directly from W.W. Norton or Countryman Press. The direct link is on my website, which is on jstarwood.com. But the actual book will be released on August 17th, just before the Telluride Mushroom Festival in Colorado, which is a big deal. So yeah, lots of photos and my journeys over the last several years of focusing directly on mushrooms and mushroom hunting, building community and meeting so many amazing people, mushroom hunters from all across the country. But the book is separated into a few different sections. The first section is called The Forager's Forest, and it talks a little bit about kind of the process of foraging and being in the forest and kind of slowing down and being present with the process. And also a lot of touching a bit on practices and safety of foraging. The following section is called The Forest on Your Plate, and I go into basic instructions on cooking and preserving mushrooms, These are a few kind of inspirational dishes that I've created. But yeah, I like to use a lot of color and texture in my creations. Then the second half of the book is sectioned into culinary mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms, and toxic mushrooms. So lots of big, colorful photos and descriptions and kind of lots of little facts about nutrition information and medicinal qualities, even of what you would call the culinary mushrooms. And what to look for, what to avoid, common lookalikes and such like that. Same with medicinal mushrooms, kind of your top medicinal ones to look for, ones you'll find in a lot of different areas. Yes, so medicinal mushrooms here as well. And toxic mushrooms, ones to keep an eye out for that you don't want to collect in your basket. So yeah, that is just a very quick overview of my book, and I'm excited to have it in my hands eventually. Soon. It's actually going to the publisher on March 12th. I have the very last version in my hands right now, looking over all the fine details and hoping I've got all my names right and Latin names and research and yeah.
Hey, would you mind talking a little bit about your gear, like what kind of camera and stuff?
Sure. I have a just a Nikon what is it? D3400. It's pretty simple. I do have a larger macro lens that I use, but those who have special lenses that can, or whatever they're doing with the photo stacking, are pretty awesome, where you can get like 100 photos of each step of focus and then be able to combine them. That's pretty awesome, but I don't have the equipment for that. And I have tried to do it manually by changing focus numerous times and then in Photoshop trying to combine those, and it's maddening. I think I've done that successfully with one slime mold photo. But after that, I was like, yeah, no, I'm not. I will have to get other equipment for that. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's my camera that just goes with me everywhere. Even if I don't even plan to be taking photos, I still bring it with, because those are the times when you run into the find of the century and it's like, this is amazing. Where's my camera? So it just is part of me, and pretty much every photo there is of me out in the field, like I have it around my neck, and because you never know. But then also, like, a lot of times I'm just using my iPhone too. It's gotten to be so they've gotten so advanced with the iPhone cameras that even there are actually a couple photos in my book that were shot on an iPhone, and that's just, I think it's pretty amazing. They get different angles, different focus points, or whatever it is than the DSLR does.
Someone was asking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I tried some of that focus stacking stuff, and man, that is something else. You probably seen Alison Pollock's photography. Marin Mushrooms on
Yeah.
Instagram, and she's kind of the master of that. But yeah, it takes patience and also like incredible sleight of hand, because changing the focus, you're moving the camera like, I mean, just a nanometer, and then the whole thing is way off. So
Right.
so frustrating. Anyway.
Someone was asking about the book. Is it Texas specific, or is it more general?
This is meant to be applicable all across the country. So, when I was selecting the species with the publisher, we tended to select ones that you could find in most areas. I talked a bit about lactarius mushrooms. We have the candy caps out here on the West Coast, but then there's also other species of milk caps. They're not necessarily candy caps, but in that category, there's ones all across the country. And morels and chanterelles, you're going to find them, different species, of course, but you're going to find those all across the country. So I tried to put little notes about regionality as well. So if there's certain species that are only found in certain areas, then I made note of that.
Yeah. Yeah, we're coming up on our morel season in Texas. I think I'd mentioned that in email. What is, can you share what your morel season is like in Southern California?
What morel season?
Yeah.
We don't really have morels in Southern California unless they're, the Rufo Brunea, the landscape morels. Like I said, I have some that pop up in my backyard here. But those are I found those last fall, I believe. But then the other day I found a few over at the market in the rose bed, and that was right in the landscaping. And so that's pretty much the extent of our morels here. I'm usually going up to the Sierras or Mount Shasta for our morel action in California.
What are they found under? Like, typically, do you find them there?
We're usually finding them under conifer, under pine here.
And they're burn morels, or are they mycorrhizal?
In Shasta last year, I was finding quite a few of the mycorrhizal ones. Yeah, but I haven't really done a whole lot of burn morel hunting, but I'm sure Northern California will probably be getting a lot of those this year.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, I could speak a bit on our California chanterelles, though.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
We it's probably one of my favorites, I would suppose, maybe just because how big our Cantharellus californicus can get. They're just huge. They're just so big. But it took me so many years to find them. And then how do you miss such a giant orange thing in the forest? But they're out there and just hiding under all those leaves.
Nice. Yeah, so big that you can make pasta from them. It was impressive.
Yeah.
Much bigger than the ones we have here, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I don't see any other questions in the chat, so we're coming up on the end of the second hour, so I think we could wrap up. But yeah, it's been lovely chatting with you, and getting to know you over Zoom. And if you're ever in Texas, we'd love to take you out, show you if we're having a rainy season. You know, it's always ebb and flow here, but yeah, I appreciate your time tonight, and we encourage everyone to follow you on Instagram and Facebook, and you know, watch out for the book that comes out in August.
Pre-order it.
Pre-order, yes.
Put us on your book tour.
Yeah.
Definitely. I would love to come out that way for sure and see what it's like out there.
Great. And it was great to see Pasquale. Hello. I know there's some fans in the audience. Bye, Pasquale.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody out there on the streams. And if you enjoyed this, be sure to like and subscribe our channels. That helps us out. Leave a comment down below. Click the notification bell if you want to be notified next time we go live, which is every other Thursday. We do a little thing. We do a Myco Hangout where we have a guest on and we talk with them on the first Thursdays, and then on the second Thursdays or the third Thursdays, my bad. We have a lecture. We have someone come in and give us a lecture about something mycological related. And if you would like us to continue doing this kind of work and build our Myco community here in Central Texas, consider becoming a member at centraltexasmycology.org, or just leaving us a donation. Yeah, and you can find out more about the kind of stuff that we do on our website there, or follow us on the socials. And with that, I will bid you a buenas noches.